pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll ask if there's a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion is adopted. There's approval of minutes of the September 7th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Any comments? Any public comments? Hearing none? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is approved. All right. Chair report. As Vice President of the Board, that's why I'm running the meeting this evening. What we will do, we will talk about reorganization later in the meeting, and that'll be something that the board will have a discussion with probably in January, as they will look to place another member of the Board of Commissioners on this committee and then also reorganize, but we'll have that conversation later in this meeting. All right, next item is review of the construction activity. Steve, I'll go to you first.
Thank you. So I think everybody that drives by can see how well the project is progressing. As I said at the previous meeting, really at this point, it's more of a building construction project, which is overseen by our codes officials, Ray Daly and his group. From the site work and engineering standpoint, we've had no issues with Villanova. I guess we had a little rocky start back on the West Lancaster parking lot. We got all that worked out. They incorporated a lot of our requirements into the contracts with this next phase of the building project. Our inspection group, QCI, is there. Villanova has their own rasher of independent inspectors. So from a site standpoint, we've really had no issues with what has been going on.
All right, thanks, Steve. Communication, Villanova. Mary Lou?
With the residence halls, we're progressing, as you can see. We just started to put trusses on the first set of buildings, and that will be followed by roofing material. We're a little behind in that, but the area was supposed to progress from the west side to the east. So as you can see, we're kind of leveling off now. Instead of it being, the fourth floor on the west side, we're fourth floor, third floor. So we're not losing time in the end of the schedule, but we're, not where we wanted to be at this time with roofing. However, we're making good progress. Our utility trench is in, so everything is distributed to all the buildings at this point. And the pedestrian bridge, we are, again, this is being done by two different contractors, and there's the PennDOT contractor, and then there's the Villanova contractor, both kind of working for Villanova. And the PennDOT portion of the bridge is probably scheduled to finish in the middle of January to the end of January, although if you get a schedule from them, it includes winter schedules, so it goes out to March. Everything is really weather dependent. Right now, we're still moving. I don't know if anyone knows, but tonight they're finishing putting the panels across Lancaster Avenue, so that should be tomorrow morning when you drive by. It will be completed there. Now, they still have plenty of work to do in the inside of the bridge to tie that all together. The overpass, or the pass from the Norristown High Speed Line to the new set of stairs will open Sunday. Actually, it's the 11th, but they open it Sunday morning at 4 a.m. for the riders. Now, that's on all the signage that is outside of Villanova from SEPTA. So you'll see signage that indicates that it's reopening on December 11th. So ultimately, I would say that by the end of January, the bridge will be 99% complete. some stuff may be pushed off just because of weather. Oh, and the elevator, the whole bridge, from stem to stern, yes. The elevator will not be completed till probably the middle of March. It's due to ship to Villanova by December, not 15th, but a week from the 15th. So they'll start next week putting the enclosure on top of the top deck for the bridge, or for the elevator. So it's progressing, but it's scheduled more for March. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
One thing before we get into comments on this, if we can, Steve and Mary Lou, if you can, for the next meeting, when we have this, if there's a way we can get like a written report on this prior to this meeting, we can post it a week in advance to the website. This way everybody can kind of read them instead of reading the reports. I know we like to hear you speak and read to this. This way then everybody's prepared for questions prior to, and then this way the public is prepared in case there's any questions or topics that come up. So this way if it's just submitted a brief narrative, bullet points of items that you have, this way then we can have it in advance so everybody has time to prepare questions that they have. This way then if there's anything from the public, if they can't make it, they can send it in or at least come prepared for that, if we can do that.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
That'd be great. All right, comments, questions from the board here?
I have a very quick question. I know you answered this 2.5 months ago. The little house that's there, that little house on the prairie. Could you just explain that again, what that is and why it's there on, near the P&W side?
It's a mock-up of the materials that are being used on housing. So it's really it's an area for the contractors to use as a basis of the color to use for the grout, the mortar, the caulk, the stone. We want to make sure that they install the stone in the colors that we want them to use. It's the roofing material. So it's really just a kind of a mock-up of all the different materials.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted for the world to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Relative to the bridge then, for parishioner use, it's not going to be open for this Advent season then at all?
It will be open to cross from Aldwyn to segment 4, which is where the set of steps are.
Yeah, but
So-
across to
I'm not 100% sure, Rick. I don't want to, I'm hopeful that it will be, but I'm not going to
okay, all right.
bet my house on it because
Right.
so far I've had a lot of disappointments when it comes to when they're going to get certain things done.
Okay, that's the chief question that has been asked of me is whether or not people will be able to use the bridge to get to church, basically, for Christmas.
Correct.
The other question that arises in my mind now is there will be apparently a period of some months where the bridge will be passable from one end to the other, except if you're handicapped. In other words, the bridge will be done, but there will be no elevator. Will we need a waiver for that, or is that going to be legally, is there a
Well-
legal exposure involved with that, or what?
I don't believe so. I could shut it down until March, until we have everything, but right now the
I
existing.
think there's probably another solution, but.
Well, I don't know if there is at this point, but, so the existing set of steps there were not ADA,
Correct.
and this will be. It just is a matter of time before it is. So it's whether or not we use it or let it not be used until we have the elevator in place.
Okay. Thank
Will
you.
I think it would be more beneficial to everyone if we used it.
Will the temporary walkway be maintained until the elevator is installed?
Yes, it will. And all the other pathways will be in. There, as a matter of fact, if you have walked by there today, all the sidewalks that are supposed to be in there have been poured and they're in place. So lighting will be on the bridge. It will be very usable.
Okay, old business, rain garden behind Stone Hall.
Yeah, this is an item from last meeting. I think we're in general agreement that that is not working as designed.
So if I
And-
can, Rick,
Yep.
you're right, it's not working as designed, and we have our landscape contractor coming out to, actually, he's been out a couple of times and hasn't corrected it yet. But we do actually have, I'm not sure what the biological term is for this, but we have little fish in there that are taking care of the mosquitoes, because we recognized this in May, that it wasn't working properly. However, I wasn't aware of it. This was our solution, was to put the minnows in there. They're not minnows, but there's another word for it. So the plan is to dig it up, and we think that it's dust from the construction, and so it's sealing it, and it's not allowing it to infiltrate.
All right, well, that sounds good, and this pond serving as a mosquito breeder was in fact the chief concern that was raised to me, and it's good that you're on it. Other options exist. I mean, I've mentioned in the context of these meetings before, Dr. Bridget Wadzook, who's a professor in your civil engineering department, who is responsible for the treatment train off of the St. Augustine Center garage and other projects.
I actually did that treatment train.
Did you?
I did.
I'm
And Bridget
very-
Wadzook
I'm
is
very-
involved in almost everything that we do with
That's good.
stormwater management. So it's not that there aren't options. We know that we can fix this, but it requires us to get machinery in there to take care of it.
Right.
So we're going to try first to do it the way it was designed,
Okay.
and see if that works.
Well, that's great. I'm very, very happy to hear that. I'm impressed with her work, and I'm impressed with the treatment train off of the garage, of course, has been in existence, as you know, for quite a while. It was demoed by the extra 2 layers that went on to the garage last year, but restored, and then
It
it's
was
demoed.
actually-
It was demoed again with the sewer project, and again restored. So I'm very happy about this.
Actually, when it was demoed on purpose with the garage project in order to include a larger storage tank in there so that we could treat the stormwater management twice. So
Good.
that was not done as it's in my way. It was done in order to try a different experiment. And so,
Well, this is extremely heartening to hear, and I'm looking forward to seeing the same sort of enthusiasm applied to this pond, pothole, whatever. Thanks.
All right, the Valley Run assessment. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Zinkowski. So this report was provided at the previous meeting, and basically what it shows is very typical of a stream in an urbanized area, which is what Radnor County, we are in the suburbs, but we are considered an urbanized area. So if you look at the results, for lack of a better term, the stream was more stressed, if you will, coming from north to south, and then as it hit the park, it got somewhat better. So this is all from runoff from rooftops, driveways, salt from the street, fertilizers on lawns. So there was nothing glaring in that report that would point in any one direction that we had a serious issue. The stream was stressed, but there was no specific item that showed that was a cause for that, other than the fact of where it is. So it's in a somewhat densely populated area of the township. Takes runoff from what was a uncontrolled, from a stormwater management standpoint, parking lot, which will be a controlled area in the new housing development, plus the township streets, the state streets, and all the homes in that area that all contribute to that stream. So there was nothing of any major surprise or consequence in that report, and we will be following up in the spring with additional testing by that same firm, RET2.
Okay, Steve, as far as the very specific concern that was raised last meeting about lead, last meeting I think we received assurances that lead specifically was going to be added to the list of chemicals tested for, to establish a baseline for it. Now, doing it now is a little late in the game. If the lead, for example, that was discovered by core sampling in Main Lot was mobilized by the construction and entered the water, it's far too late to do anything about it. So it's in the way of being a lagging indicator, if you like. If the trend falls away to zero over the years once the project is complete, then we'll know that lead was in fact mobilized. And oh, too bad. Maybe we'll do better the next time. But it's, I think adding lead to the assay, I think is important. And if it hasn't been, it should be.
If I could, so I apologize for not having the report. We did do a chemical study, and I believe lead was tested for, and I will double check. Either way, it will be done
Right.
in the spring. So we should have a baseline to go by.
Okay. Yeah. My impression was lead was curiously absent from the Ritu's original study.
We did contract with them to do some additional testing, and I'll make sure that everybody on the committee and post it on our website for the public and the Board of Commissioners. I'll make sure they get a copy of everything we have to date from Ritu with a summary from myself. So, be okay?
Okay, the next item is under new business, Villanova University Performing Arts Center grading permit, update and plans for Pike Field. We'll take these two together. That's all right. What we'll do is we'll hear from Steve, we'll have discussion here, and then we'll open up for public discussion and comment on this. So, Steve, if you want to start with this.
Thank you, Mr. Zinkowski. So this is in the Board of Commissioners packet was this map, which is also available on the table. And it's hard to see, but I clouded an area over in Pike Field. So what we have is two grading permits that were applied for by Villanova University. One is for the Performing Arts Center proper, for the construction of the Performing Arts Center. Currently, our solicitor is working with Villanova and their attorney to develop a developer's agreement, as we normally would for a project of this size, that has financial security to make sure the project's completed and certain public improvements are done. So the other grading permit is for Pike Field. I think everybody's aware Pike Field is outside of the CICD. It is not in the CICD. So what Villanova, and I'll let Mrs. Smith get more into detail, was what they requested in this grading permit application, which we do have on hand, was to use Pike Field as parking for their contractors, as well as some possible laydown area being for some large material that may come in, and if I'm correct, maybe some storage trailers that your mechanical contractors would have, you know, their pipes, their fittings, and all that good stuff. So there's two grading permits. And at the previous Board of Commissioners meeting, I sent a memo to the board and copied the manager and a host of others, noting that this grading permit was before us. So from a grading permit standpoint, this is usually done administratively. It comes through engineering and is ultimately signed off by myself. So both of these grading permits were, and I'll focus on Pike Field. So Pike Field was reviewed with our independent engineering firm, Gannett Fleming, along with myself, and it meets our requirements as far as stormwater management and others. Our grading permit requirements don't deal with temporary facilities. We really make no distinction to that end. So the grading permit application before us now, which is literally on my desk for Pike Field, is for Villanova to use Pike Field, except for the area up in the northeast corner where the stormwater management system was installed, to take care of some stormwater issues in front of the field house and on Lancaster Avenue. To use this as temporary parking, as I said, for contractors, lay down area. It would be gated so that only contractors can use it, because if you look closely, you can see that the entrance exit to that parking lot is on the road that would take you back to the structured parking should there be an event. And after speaking to the manager, just because of where this is, the magnitude of it, thought it best to bring it to the board, bring it to VU Care, and the board asked us to bring it to VU Care to basically daylight this, and it gives the residents a chance to take a look at this and comment, provide any comments, concerns regarding that. And I think tonight, we could look at what do our residents, what are their concerns, and are there ways that possibly Villanova could mitigate some of those concerns, should this go through?
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, just have questions on, one of our fellow citizens counted that the lines that are marked, and it's 206 parking spaces. Is that is that what you really need? Or can some of the contractors park in the west parking lot or somewhere else, that they could walk to work but have whatever equipment you need nearby in a much smaller space and farther away from neighbors?
So Jane, we just put the parking lines there because when you're applying for a grading permit and we're saying it's temporary parking laydown area, we just filled out those. So we wouldn't be just parking 216 cars or something like that. We're showing that whole area. And we would probably have, and I have a couple of sketches, as Steve said, we would have trailers there. So,
Right.
This is a 2-year project. LF Driscoll is going to have a trailer on site. They need to be right there. The subcontractors will need a trailer to, work out of, and then we'll use it for laydown of certain pieces of equipment. But it's an area that, when we started this about I brought this to Steve maybe in September of 2016 and said, how do I go about this? Do I need a grading permit? Do I amend the existing grading permit? What do I do? And it kind of has evolved from, just amend the existing grading permit to, no, you know what, I think we should really do a formal grading permit. So we did, and we included, part of this was Roger wanted to make sure that we had enough stormwater management to support the impervious of this area. And so we met that. We had to actually go to the Delaware County Conservatory District to get to extend our MPDS permit, which is why you probably still see silt sock over on the field that's parallel to Barclay. Barleycombe, sorry, I don't know why I was, Barleycombe. So you still see that, and because that's not a closed-out permit yet. When that becomes a closed-out permit, then we take that stuff out, but we can't take it out until that permit gets closed. Right now, that's been amended for this area. So do we have to use the whole thing? No, but we were showing the area that, pardon? For parking. We were showing the area for parking, and we are going to need it because, again, it's just a matter of coming and going, and there has to be parking for the contractors to actually do what they have to do. So
can I suggest you show some
Sure.
of the layouts? So one of your questions was, can the contractors park elsewhere? And there's,
like workers and put their trucks somewhere else and walk.
they could do that in the neighborhood, which would be unacceptable. So we
Oh,
want
no.
to.
You do
No,
have,
no,
you have a
somewhere
brand
on
new.
your property.
There is a brand new garage
But
available. It should not be now parked out.
Pardon?
We have a lot of contractors on site right now, as well as the daily use of our community, and parking continues to be a concern for us just as much as it is for the community. And so there isn't that availability for extra parking on campus to accommodate this.
If I can add to what Mrs. Smith noted, so when this came to us, to myself and Roger, after we talked about it, I thought it best to memorialize this in this fashion, okay, where they had their NPDES permit. It's a separate permit from the Performing Arts Center. This way it had its own path, and the culmination of all that and the stormwater management studies that we required them to do, along with everything else from a grading permit standpoint, which they have done, was so that this could be viewed on its own, which is why it's a separate grading permit.
Mary Lou, if you could talk into the microphone.
Mike's-
This is not a very clear picture. Perfect. So this is one option that we have. And as you can see, those red boxes over there would be the subcontractors' trailers. And you see LFD, that's LF Driscoll, who is the construction manager on this project, their trailers. And we're trying to keep that as far away from the neighbors as possible on this option. But again, I don't know what material laydown I'm going to need or have at the time. And we're going to fence the entire area in, and we're more than happy to provide an opaque fence or either a chain link with the black opaque on it, or even a wood fence so that people can't see in it. But so that's one option, and the other option is what our original was, which is to have the trailers lined up that way. And as you can see, this area right here is the stormwater management basin, so we don't want to put anything on top of that.
Yeah.
But there's that. And I think one of your questions, Jane, I heard you on TV the other night, so I just wanted to address something. You heard that this was a flood zone.
Yes.
And so I printed out late this afternoon a FEMA map, which shows that this parcel here is area of minimal flow hazard zone X. So this area right there is not a flood zone.
Okay, I'm just going by what a neighbor said.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
let you
no,
know
and
so
I'm glad
that
you did,
that's out
because
there.
she couldn't get her mortgage because they said it was in a floodplain.
But apparently she must have gotten her mortgage, right?
Well, yeah, but she was in the banking business too.
Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to show you that.
It's the other side of the street there, just below that graph there is probably what she's talking about.
Right. Okay.
Mary Lou, could I ask you, so
Sure.
over on the housing site, you have that opaque fencing, but I think it's like 4 foot high. Would you be willing to put up a higher fence, which was something that was discussed long ago? Like what size fence are you planning on putting up?
If the township lets me put an 8-foot fence up, I'll put an 8-foot fence up. Now,
With-
that will not stop you from, I'm just trying to be as clairvoyant as possible. That will not stop you from seeing the tops of the trailers, because they're probably 12 to 15
Right,
feet.
but so you're saying you could possibly do an 8-foot fence with that opaque barrier all around to cut down on some of the eye pollution, if you will?
Yeah, and I don't think I would use the blue. I would try to use something that's black, and if I can get the, without the little holes in it so that you can't see through as much.
And the runoff from this will be taken care of by the stormwater management?
Absolutely.
I mean, because you're going to be
And
putting
that's been reviewed by,
impervious on there, right? It's going to be macadam, right?
we're putting either stone or we're going to take the macadam up from, it's going to be crushed stone. It's not going to be it's not going to be blacktop.
Okay,
This was reviewed through our review process from a stormwater management standpoint.
Okay.
In which they have met those requirements. I mean, actually, the project in its entirety exceeds our requirements. And that was, I guess, at a meeting that myself and Mrs. Long and a few others a few years back went to, and we were able to get that rolling. So, yeah, but they do
Okay.
meet our requirements.
So how is this area to be lit?
It will not be lit.
Not lit at all. Okay. I presume all of this has been passed before zoning. I mean, this area is not CICD, obviously, it's PI. It's a remnant of the old PI. It's a Category 1 use, surface parking. As far as my reading of the code's concerned, I mean, I find you can't be, you have to be 75 feet from arterial. So are you in fact 75 feet from Lancaster?
I believe we are on the front. And and on the side, again, if we had to move that, that's not an issue at all.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. As you have your trailers deployed and the laydown area deployed, is
Our
there any-
trailers are well outside of the
Right.
the setback.
Right, but in total gross footage, this area that you intend to use as laydown/parking for the construction of the Performing Arts Center exceeds the footage that was required for the entirety of the dormitory project, which was the PAC footprint. Is there any possibility of cheating that green area, for example, on this slide, cheating that green area away from the property line? You're at 80 feet now. Do you move that, not go the full distance east, but instead make that line a little bit further west?
We could. I
All right.
wouldn't want to shrink it more than that, just
Okay.
because, again, I know you think that, the housing just has that one area. That housing that's just for parking.
Right.
I mean, we're using a lot of space on the
Sure.
housing site and
And,
everything else.
and to
And
reiterate.
it makes it easier for, like, again, we don't want to clog up the streets with trucks and parking and all that. We're trying to keep it on the site.
Certainly, yeah. And again, to reiterate my point, the garage can't be parked out at this point. There must be space in the garage.
We don't want contractors parking in the garage. There's a lot of events that go on. We want to make sure that the students and everyone have access to the garage when we can be parking them here temporarily.
Okay, but that long-promised population of returning drivers is still well in the future. There should be ample space.
Well, I'm not sure what, I mean,
Let's move on to stormwater then. You say the stormwater from the runoff from this area is accommodated, but how? And, I mean, you have.
Rick, you
have-
would have to ask Steve. I
have-
haven't gotten
you have
into,
tanks,
like,
you have
we've
tanks.
met
Is
the,
it pitched that way?
Mr. Leonardi, I could
No,
go
there's-
get the plans, but I can tell you, they were required to provide us with a full-blown stormwater management report. And there's temporary sediment traps, there's stormwater management on the lower end. I mean, they have met our requirement. If you, outside this meeting, if
So
you'd
I-
like to go over
Okay.
the plans, I can go over very specifically.
I only bring it up because Pikefield at present has the newly constructed BMP up there in the upper right-hand corner.
But that was for Jake Nevin, that was for an area on Lancaster Pike.
Exactly.
And
And-
it's
and-
uphill of a lot of it.
Exactly. And there is a longstanding, much older system down in the lower southeast corner, which is,
So their calculations were based without using that stormwater management system in the northeast corner.
right, well, clearly, but you're increasing, Pikefield is already hard at work absorbing, recharging water from two different locations, itself in the southeast corner, and Lancaster Avenue and the stadium side up in the northeast corner. Now you're going to pave over, another 40% of it. That's a lot of work for one field to do.
Like I said, so our ordinance doesn't distinguish between temporary and permanent. So when this goes through the review process, it's reviewed as a new parking lot and has to conform just like any other parking lot. Could I go back to the one item Ms. Smith was talking about, possibly reducing the area along the backyards of Barleycone? I think it's good that if it's okay, if we could perhaps meet that out right now. Would we be talking about a north-south line, say, if you just extended the line of the existing storm sewer system? I mean, because if that's something that's going to be done, we should flesh that out now, and we should memorialize it now. If it's going to shrink, what would it shrink to?
so if it was going to, we'll shrink it, but I would take it to, I think if you were going to go zoning, is it, how many feet off of the property line is it? Is it 200 or 125?
Yeah.
I have to check that.
So whatever it is for that, we would move it in that far.
If you could please slide that back out.
Oh, sorry.
So if you look at the existing stormwater management system,
Right here.
and if you look at the western side, and if you struck a line and just extended that straight down. would
Right,
that
but
be-
I think that's way more than 200 feet. So
It
I,
may be, I'm just asking if that's,
So I
that
would-
might give the residents the buffer that they feel more comfortable with.
Yeah,
we'll be fencing it anyway.
I think 125.
Why don't we scale it right now? What we're doing? Is that
Do-
right there to scale?
Mine is not.
No, and mine isn't either. It's like 56.
I show, code seems to say 125, category
Right.
1 use in the
So-
residential, so, yeah.
I did not bring,
What if we
I know
just say
from
you'll,
looking at
you'll
this-
work as hard as you can to try to make that line, as
That's-
close as you can
that's fine.
to that, if you can.
I would
think
like to
that-
say that we will do it to 125 feet, whatever the code says. And if our contractors don't need that much, we won't use it. We're going to put a fence there anyway.
Okay.
And where will the entrance and exit of stuff be? Like trucks?
Off of Lancaster Avenue.
So you'll do
The
the
entrance-
same?
See where it
east-
says entrance?
East in, no, I saw that, but I'm just saying, you're not putting any other entrance somewhere along Lancaster Pike?
No,
They're going to use whatever you got, the in and out that's already there?
correct.
So you're using, in essence, the existing rampway that's there.
Right.
Down to the field.
Yes.
Okay. You don't anticipate tie-ups there because it's awfully close to the pork chop?
There's a right turn lane there, so
Okay.
hopefully not.
And you'll probably use the same kind of system you did when you were building the main parking lot, where you have the trucks coming up from Lancaster Avenue, you stage them somewhere else, and then drop off materials, and they'll run away and type of thing?
Yes, it'll be a little different than the garage. The garage were really large pieces. These are not as.
Not as big.
I mean, they're large, but they're not as big.
Right.
And,
But that system seemed to work well,
yes,
so,
yes.
okay.
So can I just summarize? What I heard Mary Lou say we could do is definitely meet 125 feet. And then if we can do more, we will, but we need to check to see how much space we're going to need, but we can meet the 125, right? Then if there's an interest at the township in allowing us to build a higher fence, we're happy to do that, but I would ask that you move quickly on that. For us, I understand we're having this conversation for the first time in public, but we're anxious to get started so we can be done sooner. So if you're able to push that through in one of your final 2 meetings over the next 2 weeks, that would be particularly helpful for us.
Well, so unless there's more about the reality of the laydown, let's talk about your final line about restoration. In your letter, you mentioned that that the area will be restored.
So we have, the solicitor has been working with, so as we would do for anything of this size, there's a development agreement. And in that development agreement are financial security that these items will occur. So Villanova, either through cash, bond, letter of credit, will escrow money. They put forth to us a schedule of values of certain items in this. One of them will be restoration. There's a dollar figure that is attached to that we concur, approve with. The financial security is posted, and so by the date, and believe me, I saw what Villanova did. So I'm not pro Villanova, I'm not against Villanova, I'm just saying, so they tore up Pike Field for the stormwater management system, and lo and behold, it was ivy green with sod very quickly thereafter. So I think this field is very important to them. So they have their own impetus to get it repaired, but we'll have financial security so that if for some reason it didn't occur, the manager would call me in his office and say, Steve, get that done. I go through whatever requirements we have to based on the developer's agreement, and I would have that work done.
Okay, that's very encouraging. How does the actual escrow agreement read, however? Is it essentially verbatim with your memorandum here? Your final line is, upon completion of the PAC in 2019, Pike Field will be restored to its previous condition as playing fields. Do you think
It will actually note sod.
Okay.
Okay, and that's the line item. So with a developer's agreement is actually basically just a spreadsheet, which is a schedule of values.
Right.
So there's a task or an item, the university submits that to us, we approve it or deny it and say, no, we think this price is, too low, whatever. It comes back, and that gets memorialized in the developer's agreement. So that gets referred to, whatever that term will be. And Villanova is very aware of our concern to make sure that that is wrapped up in a little bow, that goes back. Because although our grading permit does not deal with items that are temporary, this grading permit is based on a temporary facility, and we want to make sure that when the work is done by a specific date, it goes back to what it was, which was playing field.
Okay. Well, it's just my 2 cents. I think that the plainer the language, the better. If your agreement read Pikefield will be restored to its previous condition, period, so much the better.
I'll note that. So this goes through our solicitor, who's done untold thousands of these, but I will make sure he is aware of that.
I think we should probably move on to the discussion of the structure itself, but relative to that and relative.
If you're talking about Pikefield, give the public a chance to talk about that.
Right. If we're
Okay.
set with that, I know a couple of the concerns I have on this. No, you can sit there. That's good. Dust control is one.
Yep.
That is a concern, to be able to control that. The other issue is control or hours of operation. I know with the dorms and that, there were some initial concerns with noise where the contractors get there. I know the hours are 7 o'clock, but a lot of the time the contractors get there. Some of these people are getting there at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're starting to tool up equipment or that. And being that this is much closer to the homes, whether or not we can start those crews later on, or at least arrival within that site, because the elevation now is almost on grade with those homes there. And coming in, especially now at this time, you're going to get headlights coming in, direct impact to those homes. And then especially if you get people there at 6 o'clock in the morning, starting to talk, coffee drinking, and then starting to maintenance on equipment so they get ready to roll at 7. If we can restrict those hours and push back start time there, I think that will make a huge impact to the neighbors that directly are on that property. If we can push those back to a start time of 8 o'clock, I think would make a huge impact. I know probably the contractors may not like that, but I think from the resident standpoint, hearing people, and there are some folks that like to get started at 5:30 in the morning, and starting to hear ratcheting of tools and greasing equipment, and then just general conversation. And some folks, not saying that they're loudspeakers, but you start hearing that loud conversation in the springtime at 5 o'clock and windows are open, or 5:30 or 6. If we can work something, and I think it's different just because that parking lot is on grade with those homes. So if that's something that can be considered, I think that would be good.
So Bob, we have written in our contract with all the subcontractors that they can't start before 7:30. We can't move it to 8 o'clock because of the union rules. Because then it extends it to 4:30, and that doesn't work. So we've gotten permission to start at 7:30. But I think Steve has been, I don't think we've abused that time frame much recently. Am I wrong?
So that was one of the pitfalls of the West Lancaster parking lot, where
Which
so in our zoning, it's actually a zoning ordinance that nobody can work before 7 o'clock. So trucks, large dump trucks, diesels would pull in. They weren't working, but they were idling, and that idling was problematic for our residents. So we did address that with them, and I think.
So,
Like
right.
I think the gate opening, the time you unlock that gate is really going to be the linchpin. So if the gate, even though they can start at 7:30, if the gate's open at 6, I'm going to pull my truck in, as the manager said, and Billy and Bob and Jack, we're all going to get our coffee, and it's wintertime, and none of us are shutting off our trucks, and we're going to shoot the breeze till 7:30 or do whatever it is we have to do. So I think if maybe we could come on an agreement as to when the gate actually gets unlocked by some Villanova person, security, that would go a long way in really preventing any issue along those lines.
So even with housing, and that did happen with West Lancaster Avenue, and I think we finally got that addressed on housing, and the gate doesn't open until 7 o'clock. So they're allowed to go in at 7 o'clock. This, we've pushed it back so that they start at 7:30. So we can keep the gate locked till 7:30. But
that would be
they'll probably park there. So if there's noise, we'll do our best to control that.
When you started using the gate at West Lancaster, that pretty much alleviated
Right.
all that. So I think, yeah, an unlocking time of 7:30 will ensure our folks our residents, that they're not going to have the headlights staring or the diesel engines rolling through the winter or the
Right.
summer with the aircon.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. All right, at this time, we'll open it up to public comment. So anyone wishing to make comment at this time on these items, all we'll ask is just leave your name and address when you come forward, so. All right.
I guess I'm going first. Anna Marie Husman, Barley Cone Lane. I want to start with this up. Anyone? Bueller?
Yeah, Ian?
So, a couple quick process points. I've heard a lot of talk about plans that have been in the works for a long time about this, and as an immediate stakeholder, I'm very upset that I was not directly alerted about this by the Township or Villanova. The proximity of this, that it existed as a plan, given all of these plans and ideas. The only way I found out about it, buried 400-something pages in a planning packet that was destined for last week's Board of Commissioners meeting, was, thanks to one of my neighbors, Tish, forwarding me the link and alerting me that it was there. My house is about that close. You can see my driveway on the plan and my back fence. I have been subjected since the beginning of this project to noise at all hours. I don't have a lot of good faith in promises that we're going to try to keep it quiet. I asked during the loud drilling, whatever you call it when you tear up the parking lot, I asked if they could stick to hours that were a little more humane, like after 9, so I could do, and I believe the answer was, sorry, we're going to use the time we have. I think maybe, I might be misquoting you, Mary Lou, but so as a stakeholder, I'm kind of outraged about how I found out about this and how long it's been in the works. Also, that we've quickly moved on from the suggestion that they park somewhere that's very feasible and convenient, which is the parking lot, the parking garage that they built, which was, there were like meetings upon meetings upon meetings discussing parking, a complete shell game discussing how much parking Villanova needed, promises that they'd never do more than one event at the same time to exceed their parking, at least not more than a few times a year, when I brought in pictures of Pike Field parked up for graduation and stuff like that. So I feel like this is in fairly bad faith. Some practical considerations. I like some of the mitigation people are talking about if you actually go through with this fairly obnoxious plan. But I think you really need to take a more careful look at that in-out drive that was slipped in at a meeting I was unable to attend during the CICD approval process. Used to be just one little sidewalk where people had to, wait for pedestrians and turn out. They were only allowed to turn right. Now it's a turn in from either direction, a special lane, and a turnout. I am seeing people who stop their cars in the middle of the crosswalks. I am seeing people blow through the stop signs. I am seeing people make illegal turns. There are no sidewalks on either side of that drive. There are pedestrians walking to and from the garage to the Pike for special events. When I walk down Pike sidewalk to walk across that, I've observed that Pike sidewalk ends like, I don't know, 6 feet, 10 feet from that gate, that opening gate where you're proposing all these people come in and out at 7 a.m. And, you know, once you return it, I mean, it's not well designed for pedestrian and event safety because you've maximized the footprint so much that there's no room for like actual humans to go back and forth. And it is already it's a lot busier than it used to be. It's not pedestrian friendly. And adding in all this construction activity right there is a bad plan. And I just want to point that out. We've had a number of recent noise situations that I believe were discussed at the early October Board of Commissioners meeting, which I was unable to attend. 3 nights in a row, we had sound amplified to a level that was probably damaging to your students who were attending the events. The first one was a movie night, I believe it was called. It was on after 9 p.m. I called the police shortly after 9 p.m. because it was so loud that neighbors could not hear what was going on in their own homes with the windows closed. Now, I understand that I've lived a block away from an open-air drug market in D.C. I've lived in Manhattan. I've lived in loud environments. I almost never called the police, and I called the police on that sound. Then the subsequent 2 days, the bass line from whatever concert was on Saturday was so loud, my house was shaking. Houses a few blocks away were shaking. Children were being awakened from naps. This is 3 days running that sound levels were so loud that they either physically shook homes or people couldn't hear what was going on in their homes. And there were people calling the police 3 days in a row, and there was no citation issued. And that and the stadium lights that you've never installed any like lower lights, there's someone's just running around the track. You know, of course you need lighting, but do you really need to flood the neighborhood with floodlights every time someone's using the stadium for a mild event? And these things just all accumulate, in my experience, to the university doesn't care, and I don't believe what you say anymore. I really don't, because during the whole CICD approval process, a large point was made, drawing a line between the CICD and the PI, marginalizing our neighborhood, reducing our status as stakeholders, talking about how, oh, you know, we have enough parking, we're not going to do all the events at once, except like once or twice a year. And I'm sorry, but 2 years is not temporary. As far as my life is concerned, that's not a temporary disruption. That's a long-term disruption. And you may legally be allowed to do this, but it's really offensive. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sean Farry in the 7th Ward. I have a couple concerns or issues, especially with what's going on, and then I have a couple questions I'd like to ask you, Mr. Sinkowski. The first comment I thought was slightly disingenuous from Mr. Kowalski, who said that parking is a problem for him as well and the employees. Is that correct? You said that.
I'd say it's a challenge for us at the university, yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that be part of the planning? I mean, isn't that kind of indicative of where things are going? If you don't have enough parking for you, then how can you add a bunch more people and a bunch more trucks and everything else? You know, the other thing that you guys do is you bus students, correct? You have school buses that bus the students around?
We have a shuttle bus that runs through campus.
Is it possible that you could shuttle some of these employees as you do with the students, or they could take public transportation as you know, I know that the trolley line is there as well. I mean, it seems that there are other ways to handle this that maybe, you know, you're going to cater to the union, but at the same time, you know, these are real lives, these are real people, these are real property values too. If people want to try to sell their homes and they have a huge, I guess a fiasco, so to speak, behind them, it's difficult for for them to do. When it comes to the hours of operations, my concerns are, I guess, backing that up. You said you had 2 contractors, is that correct? You said you had 2 contractors, or how many contractors do you have? Do you have a contract company, 2 contract companies, or everything pieced out on how they're going to get this done?
On the Performing Arts Center, we
Yes.
have a construction manager.
Okay.
However, there will be subcontractors that work for the construction manager.
Now, so does he have a time frame in which they have to get this done, and then after that, there's a clock that starts ticking, and then there's a give back, or he's got to give back some of the money in that case? Does that make sense to you?
No.
Okay. So sometimes when people have an event, you know, they say, look, you have to get it done by X date. If not, it's going to start costing you some of the money that we gave you. So if it's we want this done by next year this time, it's $1 million, but every month you go over, you'll give us $50,000 back. Do you have any kind of
So-
deals like that?
No, we don't.
Okay. Because that would, okay, that's fine. The next thing I have, I guess, is, and I'll ask you, Mr. Zinkowski, is there a metric for decibel or, I guess, looms of lighting when it comes to from the township? Do we have that?
We do. And
Okay.
that would be measured based on
Okay.
On a
And
plan
how
of
do we
what-
go about measuring that?
we have a contractor that we would hire, an independent that would go and do the illumination. We did that on Aldwin Lane there for that. So if there is any type of issues or questions or concerns, we would actually go out and actually measure that.
Okay, so you need them to go and measure that. Is it possible to give something for the local residents or put, you know, some kind of device up that would measure that on an ongoing basis?
Really, we don't do that on an ongoing basis because you could have someone manipulate that. If you don't know that, someone could shine a flashlight to it, or you could manipulate that. That's why if you have an independent contractor that goes out there, then they would measure that lighting based on whatever it is. If it's a constant, if it's from construction work that's going on, then you would measure it at the property line to see where that is.
Would it be possible to have that contractor that you have make periodic checks randomly?
We can do that.
Okay,
Sure we can.
'cause I think that would be,
And it would be the same thing we can do as we've done with other projects on sound too as well.
okay, with lighting and
And
regards
sound,
to
we can do that. So Steve, if we can
Okay.
just make sure we have that set up.
Yes, sir.
And then there's one more thing that I have. You know, this is a neighborhood, and I don't know if you guys know that. I know that you think Lancaster Avenue is Lancaster Avenue. It's 25 miles an hour there, and I know that that's because there's people that cross the roads and that. But I guess that, and what I've seen is just, to a certain extent, of steamrolling of what Villanova does, and I get it, by right, you have a lot to do, but I just think that in your course of doing this, just that, without being one of them saying you wouldn't want it in your backyard, these are people's homes, these are people's, primary investments, and there's a fair amount of transaction and activity of people moving, and the property values will be extremely hurt by noise, pollution, chemical smells, et cetera. So I just hope that you keep that in mind as you go about your business. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Zinkowski, and others for getting the reports to people in advance for our future meetings, and also for following up today on some of the requests that were made by our residents. I think that's very important in terms of the monitoring and also the willingness of Villanova to consider options that might help mitigate the situation for our residents. I have some other questions that I'd like to raise, and I think the other thing I would like to mention is I am also concerned, as all of the people who've spoken tonight, about the parking concerns, and I do want to thank you for posting the no parking signs on the streets during weekday hours on Lowry's Lane. I think that helps the situation. I know the neighbors do not appreciate parking in their neighborhood. I think the garage right now does seem to be inadequate for the needs that are being currently faced in our community. And I do think it would be nice if there were some ways we could shuttle people from remote lots, if that's any way a possibility. I know they do it when we have that big golf tournament, and they have shuttles that go other places. We have a P&W spot right there where people can get off public transportation, we have the SEPTA spots, we have a bus that goes in and out. I understand that the construction vehicles may need to be parked someplace, but I think the workers and perhaps students and those others who work at the university might have some alternative options as to where they might come and go as they go on and off the site. I have some questions about some of the vehicles that will be on that site and if they will be running 24/7, like if there's a need for generators. I think sometimes, I know in construction there are generators that need to run for extended periods of time, or will they only be during the specific work hours, the 7:30 time and beyond? That's a question I have.
Do you want me to answer? No, we won't have generators. We'll be, for the trailers themselves, we'll actually be running power from the garage to feed those.
Okay, and I also have questions.
But that doesn't mean there won't be generators on the construction site itself at times.
But
that would only be during work hours.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
And I also was wondering, in terms of the generators that are used, would they be low-emission type generators, or would they be burning diesel fuel? I know there are different kinds of generators. You can get gas generators that run on natural gas as opposed to diesel fumes. I mean, there are differences that you can do that might mitigate some of the air quality concerns that people might have, and I would hope that the township would look at perhaps encouraging them to find low-emission generators. I also would like to ask that in terms of the contingencies for stormwater, I know we've worked very hard, and I know Steve should be applauded for all that work, as should those from Villanova who are working to mitigate that. I'm wondering if they've planned for a 100-year storm, which we seem to be getting every other year, so during the next 2 years, we will probably have a 100-year storm. So I'm optimistic that, you know, the plans will be made to, I know they're above the standards that you've asked for in the past, but I think we need to exceed previous standards given the current climate in which we find ourselves. And I also have, I'm glad you're going to be looking at dust. I know you mentioned that, Mr. Ziankowski, and I hope that particulate matters and things will be assessed in a reasonable manner. And also that I'm concerned that when we do put in, even with the trap rock or whatever you're going to put on that field, that area will be compacted. And I hope that the hydrogeology will not be changed to the point that, you know, the sod will have difficulty growing. I know you can put sod on it, will look green, but it may not change. It may change the way in which the water flows in and out of that site. And I'm also glad the township, I had some questions about additional monitoring and testing, and I'm glad that's a consideration will be dealt with. And I also would like to ask if you foresee any unanticipated uses of that lot that might go beyond the site for construction. For example, if it was not being used for parking of the vehicles that were needed for construction and there was a significant event, would you see that as a possibility for an unanticipated use?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so it's going to be limited solely to the, as listed for construction and layout or whatever you call that, right? Okay, thanks. And can you, I'm going to ask Mary Lou if you could help me describe the type of staging you might foresee happening at that lot. I mean, it's just the movement of materials in and out. I mean, I don't know how the performance art.
Most of the construction equipment will be going in. Hold on a second. This is the Performing Arts Center site, and there's the right turn lane there. So trucks will be coming in here and going in through the site and coming out that side of the site. They will probably come out this way and go right onto Lancaster Avenue. This really, again, it's, I don't want to I don't want to say that we never will do something because I don't want to be considered like that I haven't thought it out or not. What would come in here? When I say staging, I'm not sure what could be stored there. And would it be in a C box, which would be, a container? I don't know that yet. We haven't discussed it. We've only kind of set a spot for a lay-down area. Over at housing, we have windows that are stored inside the building. So I'm not exactly sure what would be stored over there, except for we definitely need a place to put the trailers for the offices of all the different contractors. So, and as people come to meetings, they're going to want to park there and go to the trailer and go to a meeting and come out. And it takes a village to build a building.
Question while you're there, Mary Lou, is, which was brought up before about pedestrian safety on that sidewalk there. That's going to be even more heavily traversed by the contractors going in and out of there because of the activity and the construction taking place on that site. Is there a consideration to actually close the sidewalk while construction's taking place during a window of time during the day? Because I don't see how people are going to be careful coming in and out of that particular area there, or how can we ask for, I can see a burden upon those who walk and the traffic, the foot traffic, pedestrian traffic in that area, of whether or not you can provide some type of crossing guard in that particular area that provides safety to those residents who are walking and students walking in that area. Because I know, and again, this is not your issue. This is you can't stop people being dumb. I've seen these trucks come out of there without even looking in the traffic. If we can put some type of traffic control or a crossing guard in that particular area to help, one, vehicles getting it out of there, and then also pedestrian traffic, which is student traffic and resident traffic walking within that area. If you could look at something in that area, because I just by thinking about this more, I think we're going to create some type of issue in that particular area with trucks and vehicles moving in and out of there during the day. If that's something you can look at there.
We can look at it. I think it's going to be very difficult. I'm just trying to be as honest as possible to do that because I don't know if there's, one truck or 10 trucks that day, as well as you're still going to have students, the public coming into the garage in that same entrance. So it's a, it's a public
One thing that
access.
we might be able to do is talk to our public safety department to see, because I'm concerned about the driveway that runs behind the Performing Arts Center into the garage. See if there's a way to discourage pedestrian activity along that driveway. As Anna Marie was talking about, we do have some walkers that go out that way. So see if there's an opportunity to do that. I think that would, more than the sidewalk along Lancaster Avenue, I think that's the greater concern for me about the volume of pedestrian traffic. So if we can feed them all out to the corner where the main entrance is to the garage, that
because even in this particular area here in the summer months, and this is something I could talk to the board about, we don't have crossing guards during the summertime. We're crossing kids. If we can put a crossing guard maybe up here to assist pedestrians
we do at
in this
Lancaster
area.
Avenue. We don't do crossings at that driveway.
It's just the
Yeah, and
crossing across the driveway there.
Most of the people that park in the garage do not go out that driveway.
Okay.
They go out the main entrance.
Well, I'm
and they
talking
head
about
right
construction people who are going to be
Yeah,
parking
and I'm
in that
saying
area.
that no one really,
They're not going to be in and out of that lot
What I
during
would
the
say to you
day.
is that we can continue to look at that. I think, as Mary Lou said, a lot of it's going to be the volume of the activity. It won't be constant.
Okay.
So if there's a peak time and we need to address it during then
Okay.
we could talk about that. But I'd like to see
All
how
right.
it happens.
Okay, and that's something that we'll keep wired with the residents then too, that if we see this as a problem, then we'll address this with you then.
Yeah,
Because I think safety, and again too, is penny wise and pound foolish. One accident, one person gets seriously injured or worse than the few dollars that we spend now, or that you spend now, is well spent.
And there may actually be some value in having manual control of that intersection for the exit of the contractors, in as much as if you're going to insist on the right in, right out there, all the contractors who are coming from 476 are not going are not going to be enthusiastic about going down to Bryn Mawr. They're going to be looking for the quickest way to turn back the other way, and the quickest way is through a neighborhood. So you may actually find it more intelligent to have that intersection manned in such a way that the illegal left is at least permitted while, under supervision of a guard or a cop or something like that.
Would we really want to allow people to make a left when they're not supposed to?
Well,
whether there's a guard there or not?
Yeah,
I
probably
mean,
not.
you're setting it up so that at the end
Right.
of 2 years, people think they can do it.
Probably not, but
Okay.
at least
Are-
assess the flow of contractor vehicles, at the end of the day through the neighborhoods, trying to work their way back to 476.
Okay, sorry, Roberta, go.
No problem. It's very productive conversation. I would also like to raise another couple of questions. In my observations of the dormitory building, I know there were some all-terrain vehicles that the contractors were using to go from site to site, and I observed them not always behaving in an appropriate way that would be safe and in the interest of the traffic. Can we ban the use of all-terrain vehicles on that site so they're not running across the roads and perhaps endangering pedestrians as well, in addition to all the construction traffic?
On housing?
On the Pike Field and going in and out of the staging areas in that areas?
I can talk to them.
I'm just saying,
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to them, but sometimes that's, it's either that or a truck, and I would prefer them in the all-terrain vehicle than a truck. It's a smaller vehicle that kind of,
I understand, but I think they can walk as well, cycle. There are other options they have other than that vehicle, which also makes noise and drives inappropriately at times. That's been my observation. So I think, that might be something that's excessive. The other thing I would like to ask is if, perchance, from my experience being around sites where buildings are occurring, if there is a way in which you can forewarn neighbors of an event that might be atypical during the construction. So if there's going to be a very loud demolition, or there's going to be a very heavy-duty.
You mean like when we closed the road and constructed the bridge?
Right, when there's a big issue that's coming up and that's going to make a lot of noise or a lot of disruption or a lot of light or a lot of dust, that you can forewarn the neighbors and saying, this is the week we're going to take the dirt off of the top of the.
I believe we've got a pretty good track record of that. Do you have an event in mind where you didn't feel like you had a proper warning?
Well, I think the neighbors on Barley Cone are closer to this construction than have other neighbors been. So I think what traditionally has been perceived as maybe not such a big event, maybe a bigger event for them. So I'm just asking you to be thoughtful, and as Mary Lou thinks about it and talks to the contractors, so that when something significant is happening, they might, just a little email, I'm sure,
We'll continue to send out our updates.
send out updates so people have a sense of what's happening when. Thank you.
Chicken ordinance is Monday, Sarah, next meeting.
It's not chickens. Sarah Pilling from Garrett Avenue. I'm just curious. I know that Pike Field is busy every day, all day for intramural and then for the summer. Where are you going to put them for 2 summers?
Yeah, that is not a small consideration. We've talked about that. We work closely with our athletics facility staff. We're spreading them out just like we have been. We went through the period where we put the stormwater management in and the field was closed for an extended period of time. It puts stress on our other facilities, Special Olympics as well. They have been tremendous sports about it. They've gone to Baldwin for a lot of activities. And so it's just a juggling act. We've frankly had to reduce the number of activities we're able to sponsor as a result of this and the pavilion construction and things like that, which is, we're not happy about that, but unfortunately it's the price of all this progress. So we're looking forward to restoring the field. I mean, when people talk about incentives to do that, it's the greatest one in my mind. I mean, I fully understand the neighbors' concerns about having that area torn up. But from a university perspective, to be able to bring that back in as inventory for club sports, intramurals,
As fast as you
varsities.
can.
Yeah, absolutely. Summer camps, things like that. I mean, it's a big piece of flat grass. We don't have a whole lot of those.
I know you don't.
So,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Anyone else? All right. Any other items in regards to this site or this item?
Nope.
No, Rick?
Not as far as bike fields.
Or anything else on this?
Well, unless you want to treat the Performing Arts Center itself as a separate issue, I have a few questions about it.
Go ahead, go ahead.
First question is kind of obvious, but it only occurred to me now. Does the commencement of construction on the PAC, does that mean that the PAC footprint is no longer needed for laydown for the dorms, right?
The PAC footprint is not being used for laydown area. It's being used for parking. And now that we've done our excavation on Lancaster Avenue housing, they will be using that site for parking in their laydown area. I mean, the buildings are going up, so we have places to put people.
Okay.
So if you've noticed, the trailers are leaving the PAC site, and they're now being moved to housing site.
Okay. So, but,
I mean, ultimately, it was always going to be, they were going to have to move. Just,
But-
you couldn't do it when we were digging big holes.
right. But Pikefield, assuming it comes online as proposed here, that Pikefield will not be used as laydown or headquarters space or parking space for the ongoing finished work on the dorms.
No, the dorms will stay at the dorms, and Pikefield will be used for the Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
We also have
did
two
I
different
understand that
construction
right?
managers as well. So Torcon is doing the housing there on one side of Ithan Avenue, and Driscoll's doing the Performing Arts Center, so that helps to keep them separate that way as well.
Okay, sorry.
Do you need me to repeat that? Yes. So we have two separate construction managers. Torcon is the construction manager for the housing project and the bridge. They are on now that side of Ithan Avenue, and the construction manager for the Performing Arts Center is LF Driscoll. So they're on the Performing Arts Center side of Lancaster Avenue. So that separation will be helpful to distinguish the two projects, and hence why the area that Rick was asking won't be used
Right.
as prep or lay down for the housing.
Okay. Well, okay, let me just race through this list of questions then. Do we have plans to look at for the Performing Arts Center? And if not plans for the entirety of the building, can we at least see what the back wall looks like? Since that's what everyone's going to see coming westbound on Lancaster, is pretty much the first thing anybody's going to see is the back wall.
I think
of that
there's a
building.
rendering of that on the project website of the back wall.
That's it? That's all that's in existence right now? Okay, because, obviously, a great, vertical sheet of stuck-on stone with loading docks it's a poor first impression, let's say that. Relative to the loading area, how is that loading area to be lit? That's within the CICD, so it's going to be dark skies compliant, does it not? Yes. Will there be a snack bar or a bistro of any sort within the Performing Arts Center?
There's going to be a concession stand, but it's really per event. It's not like something that's stocked. It's something that our dining services will bring over for different events.
Okay. The dimensions of the driveway on the east side along the back wall of the Performing Arts Center, it's already been raised in the course of this meeting that there is no accompanying sidewalk there, that's an interesting point, and that's worth raising separately. But is that space, is the width of that driveway adequate for all the things that driveway is going to be required to do? It's ingress, egress for the parking garage. It's service way for the back of the Performing Arts Center. It's the fire lane, so it has to be kept completely clear. And in as much as it is running along the back wall of the building, the back wall of any large building like this, say like the back wall of Kennedy or the back wall of the stadium, there's going to be debris and stuff left and junk. Is that enough space back there, I'm wondering?
Which wall are you talking about?
I'm talking about the one that runs parallel to the north-south border of the CICD in back of that north-south wall of the Performing Arts Center itself. So backstage, basically.
So the driveway from Langston?
Right here. That's going to be my point is that's a pretty hard-working driveway, and there's going to be traffic of all kinds and flavors. There's going to be a loading dock there with all the junk that gets left on loading docks.
So there's no entrances to the building from that driveway?
But there is a loading dock.
Yeah, there is. Loading dock is further down,
Yes,
toward the garage.
right. I'm just hoping that way gets,
Well, that was
Is
part of
kept-
the land development and the CICD approval. That's been vetted out with the township engineers who, made us do turning radius and everything else. So I believe that we're good.
well, I don't doubt it, but it seems to me that there's still opportunities for problems there. Which brings me to the next point. Inasmuch as that is what the Barleycone residents are going to be looking at, whether or not it's heavily traveled or not heavily traveled, whether or not stuff's left there or not left there, nevertheless, it is going to be their view shed. Is there any possibility of berming along the east side of Pike Field and planning up along that berm to more adequately screen them from the back of this building?
No, he means along your property line with Pike Field.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we met individually with each property owner about.
Is it a full 20 feet wide and 4 feet high and as required?
It-
What do you mean as
So,
required?
so I understand your concern, Rick. There is a berm there. It's been there for a while. We visited each of those homes, and we met individually with each property owner and asked them for their requests to fill in any holes that they might have. Anna Marie, do you remember what the result of our conversation with you was? Did we do any extra planning?
I don't think I had any special requests for the berm. I really wanted to be able to still see the chapel I was baptized in, so I
Right.
don't really want a wall of green.
Right, so there was an interesting mix of
Okay.
conversations. There were some people who wanted us to plant in every nook and cranny. There were some people who didn't want us to do any more planting, and then somewhere in between. So as far as the view shed has gone, we've discussed that with those residents. We're not going anywhere, so if their opinion changes and there's a place to put something, we're happy to do that. And to your point, that is the point that makes the most sense to plant, because as far as the depth perception goes,
Right.
that would have the most impact. So
Yeah. The other alternative would be on that slope just to the east of that north-south driveway as it falls down into Pike Field on that side.
Yep.
A screen there is possible, I suppose. Yeah. Very well. Well, that's pretty much all I have on that. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
One last question. The completion date, the memo from Mr. Norsini mentions upon completion of the PAC in 2019. How confident are we in that date?
not, I think it's scheduled for 2020. I don't want to misspeak, but
And Mr. Leonardi, that will be part of the developer's agreement. It's part of every developer's agreement. They have X time from the execution of the agreement to complete the project. If they don't, they have the ability to come back and ask for an extension, but that will be a part of the agreement.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is reorganization. I know I spoke earlier about this, that we would wait, if the board is okay with this, to reorganize in January when the new board is seated and they appoint a new member, one of the commissioners, to this board. And we would reorganize at that time. Is there any suggestions?
I think that
Comments?
makes sense. One thing we had discussed was to shift our meetings to bi-monthly, so we would then have a February meeting in that case.
Okay.
That's my recollection. Anybody differ from that?
No. It's fine.
Yeah, the only point that's been raised to me is that we should incline towards obviously a Board of Commissioner member, and we should incline towards a Board of Commissioner member whose district either overlaps or is contiguous with a campus. So that excludes, by that metric, that excludes wards 1, 5, and 6, but all others are in.
Okay. All right.
Before public comment, can I ask one? It's been brought to my attention that the basketball light that was supposed to be off or fixed or whatever seems to be back on again and is blasting into neighborhoods. So FYI, could we check into that, please?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, the next item is public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment?
Good evening, Tish Long, Aldwin Lane. Since I've experienced the fencing with Villanova, I can attest to the fact that the Barleycone neighbors clearly need to have a substantial fence in order to block your view shed, Anna Marie. I also would ask that in light of this sudden information that the residents have received, that a meeting be held in January so that you all might get a list from all the Barleycone residents of what you might like to see. It's very sudden, it's quite shocking, and I think the residents need to be heard. Thank you.
And just from a process standpoint, I noticed yesterday morning that the agenda was not yet available on the website. I think you guys set this meeting time back in at a September meeting, is that correct? So especially in light of the fact that many of the people who are stakeholders in this process, is a significant burden for them to come out to meetings. And if they don't know whether or not there's value in attending a meeting, there's not enough time with less than 24 hours notice about the topics to be discussed for those people to organize and get here. Some of them have just super busy work lives, small children, elderly, and this is just, you know, it's the onus is on them. It's not a lack of interest when Emery is the only one on the block who shows up. And I think it's not helping when the agenda is sparse without a lot of supporting documents and kind of at the last minute and not even tweeted out. Tweeting is probably not the top of your list, but I noticed that today too, that it wasn't announced through your normal push system. So I'm assuming that correlates with the other channels through which you push information. I just request that you get more notice to the residents when something that really affects their lives is going to be discussed so that they can participate instead of just assuming they'll figure it out and then saying, oh, they must not care. Thank you.
Great.
Roberta Winters, I would just like to commend Mr. Kowalski and his staff for going individually to the homeowners, which he mentioned when they were concerned about the buffers. And I think, you know, if there was a way, and I'm not sure what it is, to find a different time or place that might work better for the Barleycone residents. I think we would all be better served by that approach because they're the ones who are going to have the direct impact. I won't see it on Williams Road, but I will hear about it, okay? Thank you.
Sure, what we'll do, if everyone's okay with this, Steve, if we can, and we'll ask Leah, we'll try to organize a meeting here in January, maybe with the residents of Barleycone, and try to have a special time in which we can meet with the residents, and maybe if we can do something at Villanova closer. I know it's not that much far, it's not like we're miles away, but maybe if we can even do something on campus closer for the residents there, to even have some dialogue and conversation with them.
We're always happy to host. We always have cookies or brownies at our meetings, so.
Okay.
But from a process standpoint, that meeting would be our regularly scheduled care meeting? Is that what you're anticipating?
I think this would just be an informational meeting where we can get some feedback and input on this, so, and I think that would give us an opportunity to, again, get some additional feedback, step through kind of what we just did tonight too, just on this particular topic. So it wouldn't be a whole array of items, this would just deal with this particular item.
So we would not be able to move forward with the laydown area until that point, and is that what you're thinking?
I think there's some conditions that have to be worked out yet with the solicitor and the engineers, and I think both of you, so I think that would have to be it. And being that we have a commissioners meeting on the 11th and then one on the 18th, I'm not sure if those would be able to be gotten to. But there is a meeting with the commissioners on the 2nd, and I think then too, there was another one that sets, I believe, right after that then too, which is the 9th, I believe. Because I know the commissioners like to meet every Monday if they can. So they may be volunteering to meet every Monday, I think, so.
Well, we do have some concerns about that. I think, you know, we heard a couple of a few concerns tonight, and we've taken some steps to address them. You know, from our standpoint, based on the conversations that we've had with township staff and understanding that has been brought out to the public, it seems like we've met what is required of us, and we're certainly happy to have a meeting. But we very much would like to move forward with this so we can, again, as I said, start sooner and end sooner. And, you know, would want to perhaps do those concurrently.
Maybe if we can, maybe we'll try to move this up. If you're agreeable, maybe we'll try to do this in December here within the next, maybe in the next week. And this way that kind of gets the information and gets the information out to the residents quicker. If we can do that.
Previously, you had anticipated that this would be on a Board of Commissioners meeting. We're happy to come in and make a presentation on Monday so that we could move it along. That certainly has a wider audience.
I think the board kind of pushed it here. And so I think from our perspective, I think here is we've discussed a lot here, and I think now for us to go back and meet with those residents, and then I think if we come up with what the agreements, what you've come up with here today, the comments of what you're looking to coordinate with, and then we all have an agreement here, Steve, so.
Along with what the manager is saying, so some of the items we spoke about, so, you know, maybe, like I said, we could do it within a week, you know, have the plan that shows 125 feet from the property line of the Barleycone folks, maybe some notes on the plan that say start time 7:30, gate doesn't open. And we can put that out before the meeting and then have our, you know, our casual, so to speak, non-board meeting that we talk with the residents and make sure everybody understands what's going on in Villanova, puts forth what they have. Because, nothing against any of the lawyers that may be in the audience, but I know it takes a little time for them to get these developers agreements done. So we can do this concurrent with everything that's going on.
I think if we can have a meeting within a week, that would be acceptable to us. If the time frame is longer than that, we would have some serious problems with that.
Well, however the situation evolved, I think it's worth bearing in mind that tonight is the first time any of this has been officially made public. This is the first time, in an official sense, any of us has been aware of these plans. So, yeah, getting this done in a week is, you know, that's a good goal, but it's awfully fast. Particularly, and I recommend everyone do this, you know, to go to the code and look up section 280-72, institutional long-range development plans. There's a lot. I mean, I won't read the whole thing, but there's a lot of high-flown language in here about timely notice to neighborhoods that are impacted by institutional plans. There's a lot of very, very noble verbiage in here about, keeping everybody informed and involving the public before sunk costs, trap everybody into plans that, may not work and may be poorly considered. 280-72, go read it, and we'll meet in a week.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
You want to try to set a date right now? since we're
I
here?
was going to say, so that would be the 13th?
Steve,
No.
do you know what's happening that night, Steve?
I do know, and I'm not going, but that's okay. But I am representing. So could we, I have a stormwater committee on Thursday night. I don't think anybody wants to meet Friday night.
I'm fine with Wednesday if Wednesday works for everybody else.
So that would be Wednesday.
Oh, Mary Lou can't.
How about Tuesday, the 19th? That's the night after our board meeting? Would that work? Tuesday, December 19th?
I think it's got to be after the board meeting, obviously, right?
What about the 12th?
I don't know if that's enough time for everybody. It's a little less than a week.
What is,
Does the 19th
I'm
work
not
for
sure
everybody?
what there
December
is to
19th
look
at a location that Villanova will provide? And that way our neighbors, our residents can start getting that word out tonight.
We can also use the call-out system that we have, in which we can dial out the call, and we can put the calls out twice to the neighborhood. And we can host the meeting here. We'll put a car out in the neighborhood, too.
can't do it.
Mary Lou can't do it. We need Mary Lou for the meeting. Yep.
No.
And we'd be flat at the 12th, right?
Correct.
The 20th?
Well, can we not ask?
So I know we're talking about this meeting, but one of the challenges we're having is just, again, what are we talking about? We're having an informational meeting for more of the neighbors to participate in this conversation?
Because, Bob, we've also spoken to a number of the neighbors who've called us and emailed us on Barleycone, so I think it's out there. And we're happy to, if we can, we're all busy in December. We're happy to go walk and meet with these people, have a conversation. I just am not so sure what's going to happen short of if we just don't do it there. Because we can shrink it and we can fit it into the footprint that you want us to do, and there's going to be a fence. Other than that, I don't know what else there is to kind of talk about. It's a grading permit. Typically, you go to the township, you submit for a grading permit, you get it because you've met the requirements, which we do. So, I want to be helpful, but I also, we've been doing this since 2016 and then submitted in June of 2017.
Well, I think we want to make sure we review the conditions and that we make sure we understand the conditions. I think everybody, that what we discussed here and what everybody heard, that we reduce that to the plan, so.
So
I think-
could we put a
what did
memo
what did
out
we talk,
tomorrow?
The 12th, Steve, is that what you talked about?
okay. Yeah, I think we can do it. I don't know if that's.
What we said, we could use the call-out system. We could use the call-out system to call the homes. We could put 2 calls out through our dial system. We could put a call out tomorrow, then we could put another call out.
I have a party at 7:30, but
So that would be Tuesday, December 12th, 6:30 PM, somewhere in this building?
can we
I mean,
make,
the second floor of this.
can we make it earlier? Again, I have plans on the 12th. I'm very busy.
We could, Right. So,
It's a mixture, and I really don't know their schedule. They can't speak on behalf of their schedule.
right.
I don't have the pipeline.
So I'm happy to reach out. I have all their email addresses because we've reached out to them before. We've spoken to 3 other neighbors, so I think that they're aware of it. Again, I'll
We'll
go back.
we'll go with the 12th at 6, we'll go at 6:30. And then what we'll do is
I'll be leaving at 7.
we'll have an open area at 6 o'clock. So if people want to come in, we'll make it available at 6 o'clock. So that we'll have plans, so if someone wants to walk in, they can look at the plans, have conversation, dialogue, where if they want to come in earlier, we'll set it for 6. And this way, we'll be available for questions, answers, comments, suggestions, and we'll stay here for as long as necessary. And I know, Mary Lou, you have to leave, but we can be here at 6 o'clock. And as we've done with different stormwater projects where people can come in and go out, have input plans, review them individually, so in case in a bigger crowd they feel uncomfortable speaking, they can speak one-on-one individually.
Kind of like the
Discuss their
open house?
concerns. Absolutely. So I think we'll have it in that kind of setup, and we'll make one of the calls tomorrow. It'll be in this building somewhere, so it'll be either here or upstairs, so it'll be somewhere in this building. So the 12th at 6 o'clock, and it'll be an open house. This way we'll have the plans laid out, and then we'll take comments. And then we'll also record that then too, so it'll be recorded here or upstairs. Maybe a long open house, but it'll still be all recorded. Right. Anything else? Motion to adjourn. No, we'll set it at that time, at that meeting. All right, motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second. All in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.